Welcome to episode 33 of the Busted Buns video game podcast, and we got a real interesting one today because this is a game we're talking The Last of Us Part 2 all episode long, but this is a game that really is kind of like, it has mixed feelings from everybody. Like, there's parts that like really make me upset, but there's parts I love about it. Like, you know, to me, I think it's a very good game, not a great game, but we're going to get into all that. I can tell you what, though, man, it is an emotional game because I was watching some cutscenes today and everything. I was like, damn, man, this game is rough. So, like, next time we talk about game, we're going to do, like, Nintendo or something happy or something because I can't take all this emotional stress from the game. But anyways, we're going to be talking story, chapters, gameplay, legacy, the future of the franchise, and there will be spoilers. We will be talking about everything in The Last of Us Part 2, including the ending. So if you have not played this game and beat it yet, we highly suggest that you come back to this podcast at a later time because we are going to talk about everything. But anyways, Red, I'm going to kick it to you right here. Very simple like the last podcast episode, which we talked The Last of Us. Like I said, story, chapters, gameplay, legacy, future. Red, go ahead and take it off with the story. What's your opinion?
Well, the original Last of Us set such a high bar for story.
Yeah.
It's as we mentioned last episode, one of the best stories in video gaming history, in our opinion, and in a lot of people's opinion. So the bar was really high, and The Last of Us Part 2 just didn't quite clear it for me. It's a good story. It is a good story, and I really like the way they structured it, and we'll kind of get into that, here in a little bit. But like the way they told the story was really good and unique. But the story itself it was a dark story. It was,
but that's not why it's bad, though. You know.
No, it's not why it's bad. It's just for me, it didn't have quite the same feeling of the first one.
Yeah,
it's just because this one is all about revenge.
Yeah.
Like early on in the game, you mentioned it's an emotional game. Like very early on in the game, Joel gets killed. One of the main characters from the original game. He gets killed off. And so Ellie is trying to get revenge for half of it. And then, on Abby's side, and like I said, we'll go through these story beats, but on Abby's side, she's trying to get revenge for when Joel killed her dad, the surgeon, in the first game. So the first game was all about hope. Like Ellie was immune and they were trying to get her to a group of people who could do something about it, maybe create a cure. This one is all about revenge. And I think that because of that reason, it didn't resonate with me quite as well as the first one did. It's just like, I don't have a problem with a darker tone. I don't have a problem with a darker or like a revenge story even. They can be really good. But just for me, everyone is just so angry in this game. And I get it's a shitty world they're living in. When you're going through the zombie apocalypse, all that, I get it. But to me, though, just it really does. It did hold it back. That the first one was very much about hope. And even as you're going through this horrible world, there was hope. And this one's just like, no, these two people just want to fucking kill each other.
Yeah.
And so to me, that, it was less depth to it for that reason. And so that was just my general take on the story. But what about you?
It missed the mark for me, to be honest with you. And it's still when I beat the game, I look back, I said, you know what? That was still a great story. But for the Last of Us franchise, it was not that fantastic of a story, to be honest with you. And just, first of all, they killed Joe way too early in the game. Joe's a character we went through the entire first game with. We formed an emotional bond with him. And I just thought they killed him off a little bit too quickly. Now, it is nice that we get flashbacks later on in the game with him. I'm glad they just didn't cut off right there and we didn't see him at all. But it got too far away from the first game. Like you said, the first game was all about hope. And then this one's just like a teen drama, revenge story and retribution. It just missed the mark. It just missed. And like I said, that doesn't mean it wasn't a great story. And in terms of video games, I think it was still one of the better stories of the past year. But just, here's the thing with Naughty Dog. I think I said this in the intro. I say the game is very good.
Yeah.
The Last of Us, the original part 1, was great. Yeah. This game is very good, which obviously is very good for a video game, but I expect more from Naughty Dog because of the stories and the games they've had in the past. Obviously, The Last of Us, and then also the Uncharted games.
Uncharted games, great stories.
I was just expecting greatness because that's what Naughty Dog has given us. And as I'm going through this game, I'm just like, I don't know about that decision. And like, a lot of, Ellie's sexual orientation, her being lesbian, and then also Abby having muscles, like those are two things that did not bother me or you at all.
No,
and like it bothered a lot of other people, but what I'm trying to say is that like that part didn't bother us at all, but we still didn't like the story.
Right.
So like, there's a lot of people out there that are just dissing on the story because they don't like those two things, which, I think is totally idiotic, but
I completely agree.
This podcast is not a place for that. But
no.
Like that did not bother me whatsoever.
That's its own podcast right there.
Yeah, but I don't know. Everything didn't come together the way I wanted it to, and I don't know. Do you think it took place too long after the original, or did it take place in the right time period? What do you think?
I was fine with the right time frame. If they were going to make Ellie kind of the playable character, which she was for the first maybe little over half the game, she needed to be older than she was in the first one, so that she could do all the crazy shit that you can do in this game. And gameplay wise, I know we'll get into gameplay in a little more detail.
But why can't we have Joe again for this game?
And I think they just wanted to do something different. And plus, they needed to, if the whole story was going to be on revenge, they needed a reason for them to want revenge. And Abby had a good reason that tied excellent with the first game, when her dad was the one who was supposed to be operating on Ellie and Joel killed him. So that's that was built in. That was great. But Ellie needed an excuse to go on this revenge fueled campaign. Yeah. And so killing Joel, I think we kind of, and I made the comparison to the shocking deaths in Game of Thrones and kind of how we had some shocking deaths in The Last of Us. I honestly think because of Game of Thrones, some of the, Joel's death maybe didn't hit quite as emotionally hard.
It hit me hard, man.
Well, it's one of those where it did hit hard because we did spend 20 hours or whatever with him in the first game, and he was a great character, very fully fleshed out character. But I think, it's just after going through something like Game of Thrones and even the first The Last of Us, that shock value's almost kind of worn off. And then, or maybe a little more desensitized to it now. And then also, I feel like
diminishing returns. You just don't get as much usually with the second one. The first game was all shocking to us and everything. And then from this one, we just expected a lot more. And, we didn't get it, which is basically the law of diminishing returns.
Right. But then, they killed off Ellie and, what is her girlfriend's name? Dina. Ellie and Dina's friend got killed off. And then Abby's friend, who
are you talking about Jesse for Dina's friend? Or somebody else?
Yes, the one that knocked up Dina.
Yeah, that was Jesse.
Yeah. Thank you. I got a few of the names forgotten here over the course of the game.
You just beat it last week, man.
Hey, but he died months ago in my time frame.
Yeah, that's true. Because it took you forever to get back to the game, which I think says something about the game because I remember me and you, we played the first one at different times, but we started it and bam, we knocked it out. Now, it's only a 20-hour game, but I mean, it was a fast game for both of us. Right, and this game, I pretty much went all the way through it, without, I might went out to another game here and there, but for the most part, I finished it out. But you took maybe a month off or something like that. Yeah. And I think that says a lot about the game. It didn't grab your attention the way the first one did.
It really did.
And you're kind of talking about this, but there's a great connection between Joe and Ellie. Right. And we just didn't get that connection with this game. In my opinion, obviously this is Red and I's opinion. So you might feel differently and that's completely fine. But I just didn't feel that connection. I didn't feel as strong about Ellie and Dina, or Ellie and Jesse as I did Joe and Ellie. Right. And then the problem with this game is, man, I did not care for Abby. And like I said, I know a lot of people got upset because she had big muscles. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. Why that matters, I don't understand. But that did not bother me at all. But
oh, hell no.
I just did not like Abby at all. Well, first of all, she's a bitch. And then two, she kills Joe. So at that moment, you got to go, man. You just got to go. But, as we start playing as Abby, which I absolutely hated, but, because it was just too much.
Oh, we're gonna butt heads on that one.
Okay, that's fine. We'll get to it. But, I forgot I was saying that about Abby. But I was kind of hoping that, okay, after she kills Joe, Joel, I just hate Abby. But I was I went in with an open mind when I started playing as Abby, and I was like, you know what? I want to get something that makes me care about her. I want to change my opinions on her. And there's a point in the game where that was starting to happen, where I was starting to feel for Abby, and then the game just got away from it. And that was kind of the whole pacing of the game that I know that we both complained about. So you kind of want to talk about the pacing and the issues you had with it?
Well, the game just seems overly padded. And this is not so much because of the story. Like, the story's fine. It's just there's so long chunks in between anything happening. Like, and part of that is they made the game a little more, like, areas of it are a little bigger, a little more open. So it's more stuff to explore. But there's so...
Did you like that part of it?
No.
I didn't either. I did not. It was too much for a linear game.
Right. And the main reason that I didn't like it, though, is it was nothing to do in those sections. You would scavenge some supplies and you'd fight a few enemies. And that is it. Like, it didn't give me a reason to care that this was a bigger areas to explore. And yeah, there's new different ways to do combat. But I feel like just you would spend hours between like something actually happening in the story. Like, I remember you and me talked about this very early on in the game. Like, yes, Joel gets killed off right at the very, like the first 2 hours of the game.
Yeah.
Whatever. Nothing else happens for like 8 hours. Like the rest of the stretch is just you as Ellie traveling to Seattle to find the group that did this. So it dragged. And part of it is that, people like saying, oh, there's more content. But when it's empty, repetitive content, in my opinion, it detracts. Like, and I think that's why the story suffered for it. Because like I said, the story is fine. Like, it didn't hit with me as well as the first one, but it's a good story. Like you said, you liked it. But when there's so much in between stuff happening, you kind of lose track of the story sometimes. There were times, and yes, part of it, I took a little bit of time away from it, but there were times I'm like, I don't even remember what the hell I'm actually supposed to be doing. I feel like I've just been walking on this road or climbing this building or whatever.
Because you play for 10 straight hours. I don't know if it was 10 straight hours, but it was a long time.
There were long chunks between like stuff actually happening in the story. So I do think the game suffered very much from being a little overly padded with those sections. I mean, Naughty Dog, as usual, did a great job putting like notes and things like that really fleshed out the world a little bit. And like, it told some smaller stories within the bigger story that you're going through. Yeah. But, even that reward is diminishing returns as well. And so for me, the pacing definitely affected my enjoyment of the story. Because I'm like, if nothing's happening story-wise, why do I care? But
it tried to be too much. Like, make a decision. Are you open world or are you linear? Because you're sure as hell ain't one of those hub games like God of War. So, like, to me, there was just, like, you were kind of talking about this, there was too much content. Like, this game is very simple. The first one, like, it was a very linear game with a great story. And then this one's like, okay, we're going to do that same thing, but we're going to be somewhat open world. No, you can't do that in video games. Either be one or the other. Because if you're a linear game and you try to be open world, well, I'm going to get upset because I think I'm playing a linear game and then all of a sudden I have to explore more than I want to. That's okay in my open world games, but I'm playing a linear game to get away from an open world game, so I don't want that in my linear games. So to me, like, they just tried too hard, I think, with this game. And they said it's the most ambitious game that we've ever done, but that's not always a good thing. And we saw that, like, you had a formula that was very simple, linear, story, and a little bit of gameplay, and it works. And then this one, you try to be linear. Your pacing was way off. You try to be open world. Like, there's not a lot to get in this huge, like, where you opened up these areas and made them not so linear. Like, there just wasn't a lot to grab, like you said. So, I mean, for me, that's another, like, the story missed the mark. And then I think, kind of related to all this, I think exactly what you said. This had something to do with it because you put too much in between the cutscenes. Because like I just said, I don't know if it was 10 hours or not, but there were gameplay periods where you didn't get a cutscene for quite a long time. And I was like, okay, I expect cutscenes from The Last of Us. This, like, if you're telling a great story, it's got to have not a lot of cutscenes, but it's got to have that right pacing of cutscenes. In this game, like, you would get a cutscene and then you wouldn't do anything 8 to 10 hours later. And by that time, I'm like, what the hell was even going on in the story? And you made a good point with Joel. Like, he gets killed in the first 2.5 hours. And then I believe it was like right around, my gameplay. It was right around the 9-hour mark until something else happened. Like, that's way too long.
It is. And just, Yeah, I feel like we're just bashing the game the whole time, and I'm
Yeah,
going to continue
we
doing that
are.
a little bit. And it's a good game. Like you said, I tweeted out when I beat it, very good, but just shy of being great. But the story had a couple other things that really irked me. Like, and then I am definitely.
Well, here's the thing, man. Like, I want to interrupt real quickly, but I gave it an 8.5. So I think, like I said, a very good game. But I think this game meant a lot to us. Like, it's an emotional game, and I think that's why we feel so strongly. Yes, we think it's a very good game, but it was a disappointment, and that's the way it's coming off. But go ahead.
No, so I was just thinking, we spent a lot of the last episode talking about the relationships. The relationships between Joel and Ellie felt so real. Then you had Henry and Sam in there, and everything else. Like, they felt like genuine relationships. I didn't care that much for Ellie and Dina's relationship.
Yeah.
And I feel like they really tried to pull just like some random shock value stuff, like that, not just the people getting killed, but like revealing Dina's pregnant. Like, I honestly don't think that added anything to the story. I mean, it's like great, and it gives you one more thing to fight for.
Yeah,
but
if anything, it detracted because she could have went along with us on our adventure, and then that relationship might have developed more outside of that theater.
It really seemed like an excuse to sideline her and have you go it alone as Ellie. And then later in the second half, we played as Abby. So like just not little thing, that's a big thing, but like that stuff really missed the mark for me, because I'm like, she finds out that Ellie's immune, and I feel like that should have been a bigger deal. But like as soon as she finds out Ellie's immune, Dina's like, oh, by the way, I'm pregnant.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, that is just, it's like they were trying to do
cheap moments in the game, like where you said they try to get shock value, and it's just like, I think you might have missed there on that one.
Exactly. And it was cool that it was with the ex, so that added some, and then he shows up, and that adds a little bit of tension to like the relationship. But to me, they didn't do enough with it. Like they never really went anywhere with it until
I feel like that felt forced. Remember in the last episode, we were talking about the game being natural. Some of these relationships and the dialogue and what was happening, to me, felt forced.
Right. I'm completely with you. And then Ellie even finding this out, like her girlfriend's pregnant, all this stuff, like she's still so dead set on this revenge. Like she almost doesn't care about Dina except for, hey, help me find where Abby is so I can go get revenge. Like, so it's, and switching gears to Abby's story, I felt like her, yes, she wanted revenge and she killed Joel early on. Like that was very early on. So she got her revenge. Yeah. And her whole story was she was just trying to find her friend. Like her friend had went missing, and so she was out trying to find him. And of course that leads to, meeting Ellie and all that stuff down the road. But like, I thought Abby's story was better than Ellie's. And I never thought I would have said that going into this game. Well, at first I didn't know that there were going to be two different stories like this. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But like, Abby was all about like, I want revenge. Abby got her revenge in the first 2 hours of the game when she killed Joel. And then the rest of like her story, she's just trying to find her friend, who Ellie, does end up killing, but which spawns more want for revenge, of course. And so I actually thought Abby had the more relatable story, I guess, that made me like it a little bit better. But we spent a lot of time talking about Ellie's story. What did you think of? I know you said you didn't necessarily like playing as Abby, but what did you think about at least her story?
Yeah, I didn't like, I don't know if it's because I didn't like her, but I don't feel the same way. I really didn't care for her story that much. And like I said, it might have to do with me thinking that she's just a bitch. Right. But like, I don't know. I can't sit here and exactly like point out to why I don't like Abby. All I know is that like I'm playing this character and I just don't like her. Right. And I don't know if it was her dialogue. I don't know if it was her attitude. Like her face, like she always just looked mad and upset. Like, now you can say the same about Ellie, but damn it, Abby, smile every once in a while. So I know that you care. But for me, that's what really ruined the game for me. Like, you can say the story, but that story was thrown in there. Like the whole story of The Last of Us has been Joe and Ellie. Yeah. First finding the hope. But like that's been the story up until now, and then they throw
it's been Ellie's story,
like in there, like it just a lot of times that doesn't work, and it didn't work for me because I'm like, why did that need to happen? Like, okay, if she wants to be a part of the story, I'm okay with that, but we don't need to go and do the exact same 3 damn days that we did with Ellie. That's where the game got stretched out way too much because you sit there and you end with a cliffhanger where Abby is pointing a gun at Ellie, and then you say, "Oh, you don't have to play 3 more days as Abby. You just did that shit with Ellie." So, like that to me right there, and maybe that's why I didn't like Abby as much, because they made me play another 3 days as her. But that, to me, like, I hate that. I hated, like, if we would have played as Abby, like, here and there, that would have been okay. But to make us play almost the same amount as Ellie, because Ellie's a character that I like a lot.
And we have a previous relationship with from the first game.
And, like, I don't know if that gave me disdain for Abby, but it was just too much of her. Like, the whole 50-50, like, it was just like, okay, here's this character. We're going to throw this character in, like, at the beginning. And then, you're going to play half of the game with them, even though you have this attachment to these other two characters. And, by the way, we're going to kill off one very early in the fucking game, So just, for me, I think the gameplay was better during that part, to be honest with you. Because you had the whole, like, going up in the skyscrapers, going across that crane, which I was hoping that, Abby would fall off of. But, like, so I did think the gameplay was better. Her character, I feel like she is, like, they both are very well at fighting, but this has nothing to do with Abby's muscles. But I feel like she was more athletic in the game. Yeah, I don't know if you felt that way, but I felt like she was more athletic. And so the gameplay was slightly different. And I think it was more fun, and just, Ellie's gameplay was mostly like on the ground, like it felt like confined, whereas Abby, you're going up in the air, you're going up elevators, you're going through woods. Like, I think it is better, but still, I just did not like the part. It was too much Abby. It was too much of a character that I did not like.
Well, I will say, I do agree that Abby's part was too long. And I'm kind of torn on this, because I did like the way they showed, Ellie's perspective for the first, 3 or 4 days, whatever, 3 days. And then they switched and showed what Abby went through those first few days. Like, I liked that as a storytelling process.
But it was too long.
But Abby's was too long. And I didn't need all the stuff with the two scars that she's running around with, Yara and Lev.
I hated that plot point.
And it's just, part of that's also going to be a criticism on the wolves and the scars. I'll get to here in just a second. But no, I liked the method that they told the story, like showing here was Ellie's, and then you get the other perspective. Whereas actually, like I said, I thought Abby had a little bit of a better like story. She's going to go find her friend. But I do agree that her section dragged on way too long. I did not need to know every little thing she did in that period. Like,
they should have made those 3 days like 10 hours. That would have been perfect. Like I said, we got too far away from that climax.
We did, and I liked how they married the two stories together, and there was enough overlap. You could see what was going on. And I really did like that, but just all in all, her section, Abby's section was way too, well, okay, honestly, both sections were way too long.
Agreed.
But so I liked how they framed that story and told it, but you're absolutely right. They could have cut down the length of both of them. But, I kind of mentioned the two factions that we're really dealing with in the game are the Scars and the Wolves. They're both very hateable groups that don't get any redemption in this game. And I don't need every video game to have like a redemption story or, maybe this side was right all along or whatever. Like, these two sides were just, one was a bunch of militant assholes and one was a bunch of religious fanatics. It was two unlikable sides, even when you're playing as Abby, who at the beginning is one of the wolves. She eventually leaves. But like, even when you're playing her part as one of the wolves, they're still just a bunch of militant assholes. Like, and then the Scars they never give. You get the one that gets kicked out of the Scars because he shaved his head, of all damn things. So we get to see
those religious cults, man. They're serious.
They're crazy.
Their stuff.
But so to me, neither of those two major factions in this game had any redeeming qualities whatsoever. It's just two groups fighting each other. They were there to be gun fodder for Ellie and for Abby. But to me, like, again, I thought that was a missed opportunity to show, okay, maybe either side.
But the game's already too long. Like, you're almost 25 to 30 hours in. You start putting those characters in. Like, I agree with you. But then you start putting those characters in, all of a sudden you're looking at a 35 hour game. So
it's just one of those things where it's like, there were a lot of different directions they could have gone that I think would have made a little more sense or fleshed out some of these characters, some of these cults, whatever, or factions, whatever. The only one of them was a cult, the other one was a military. But so I don't know. It was a lot of missed opportunities, but you're right. It probably would have just made the game even longer than it already was at 30 hours. But you kind of started hitting on gameplay a little bit, and I think we've talked enough about story. I don't think we need.
I want to tell people that like early on in the intro, we said we're going to talk about story and chapters. I feel like if we go through the chapters now, we're just going to rehash a bunch of stuff that we really already talked about. So I kind of agree with the Red. I think we should go on the gameplay. So kind of go ahead with what you were saying.
So first and foremost, I really thought the gameplay of part 2 was worlds better than the gameplay in part 1. It just felt tighter. Like the controls were tighter. The first one, and I think I mentioned this in the last episode, like your character felt floaty, especially compared to other Naughty Dog games. Like I played The Last of Us Part 1, like literally in between 2 of the Uncharted games. And Nathan Drake controlled so much better, in my opinion, than Joel did in Part 1. So for Part 2, all right, I keep calling it Part 1 even though that wasn't the name of it back then.
Yeah,
but you know what I mean. But Ellie's controls were so much tighter than the controls in the first one. Like it was more precise, and I think that led to more fun like gunplay, more fun stealth, just all in all, she was easier to control, I thought. She would actually do what you expected her to do. Unlike sometimes the controls with Joel were a little floaty and imprecise, but with Ellie...
You do have to remember, the original was a PS3 game. Now, it was remastered, but some of those same controls kind of crept into the remaster, but go ahead.
You're absolutely right on that, and that is a good point. I mean, the original was, it came out in what, 2013 originally? Yeah, so I mean, things weren't perfect back then.
No.
But no, so I really like some of the little changes they made, though, to the gameplay. Like, you can jump in this one instead of just climbing. And I didn't do that a ton, but there were some places where it worked out well, like jumping over cover, things like that. Yeah. And just
it made the combat scenarios more vertical too.
It did.
Like if you wanted to use that, I didn't jump much either, but you could do that.
Absolutely. And then just things like you dodged instead of blocked. And I feel like in most action video games, I'm used to dodge instead of block, because you like dodge and then you attack. And like I'm playing Ghost of Tsushima right now, and I dodge way more than I block. So.
I do want to ask you a question. I know I put that note in the outline because I saw it on the internet, but do you remember if that's actually correct? Like in the first one, did you actually just block and not dodge?
To be completely honest, I can't remember. It's been so long since I played the first one.
I put that down. I was like, okay, people, we're not absolutely sure on that one. I just read that on the internet, but when I was thinking about today, I was like, I don't really remember if there was only blocking in the first game, but go ahead.
Right. Now, and so like little things like that I thought were really good. One of our not really necessarily complaints, but something that we talked about last episode for part 1 is the fact that when you stop to craft something, it doesn't pause the game. Zombies are still coming at you. Enemies are still shooting at you when you're trying to like switch out weapons or craft a new health kit, things like that. So that remained here in part 2. And in some places I do like that it adds a little realism. The world doesn't stop when you need to heal yourself. I get that.
It should.
But it
should. Like it should know what kind of player is playing the game. And they're like, oh, Hick's playing. Okay, we're going to pause the screen while he's trying to craft some items here.
Right. So that is, is a major gameplay element was still there. So, but, I feel like I've been talking this whole few minutes on gameplay. So I'll throw it to you. What is your general thoughts kind of on the gameplay?
I mean, really the same as you. I mean, a lot of the gameplay was the same as the original. But I did like that, like, they added little things like you rode in a boat this game. I can't remember if you rode on a horse or not the first game, but if you did ride on a horse the first game, they made it better in this game. So I mean, things were very, very similar. They added like you talked about, you could jump, like combat was more vertical and stuff. So overall, the gameplay was very similar, but like you said, it was smoother, which makes sense for a game being released 7 years later. But just overall, really playing the game, like you all heard us bash on the story quite a bit, even though, we'll kind of get back to it a little bit. But the gameplay was solid, man. I really can't think, like there was really not any glitches or anything like that. Like I can't remember really run into any issues. The only issue that I have is, once again, just like the original, that stupid like getting your guns. Like you had to push like up, down, left, right, and then you had to hold down square to switch weapons. Oh man, I hate that. Now later in the game, you do get more slots, and it makes it easier, but I hate that mechanic, man. You can sit here and talk about survivalists or all this other crap. Like, you don't have to hit directional buttons like when you're surviving. So I just, I know it's a video game and everything, but I don't like that, man. I don't like that at all. But just, crafting like a lot of the same items you could craft, like the health kit, Molotov, bombs, mines, whatever. You had the pills again, I believe, to upgrade abilities. I believe that was the same in the first game. And then you had some collection. Now, here's the thing that I did not like. You had trading cards in this game. I loved those comic books in the first game. Like, those were so good.
I did too.
We talked a lot in the last episode about how the original just kind of had those slow moments that, there's so much chaos and craziness in the world that there's these little things that got you away from that. Like, one was the giraffes, but, another one was those comic books. Those were very good, points in the story. And then this game, was missing that. It just had artifacts. Cool, whatever. Trading cards, Redhead comics, those seemed a lot cooler. And Ellie seemed to like them a lot more. Like, you didn't really hear talk that much about the trading cards. Now, I know it is a collection, and there's freaking infected running around everywhere. So she's not going to be talking about trading cards that much. And,
plus she was by herself so much more in this one than in the first one. So there's also that.
Training manuals, I don't know if that was in the first one or not. Who cares?
I don't know.
They're training manuals. Like, you don't really, I think it was because you had to open up your slots or whatever. But, overall, my feelings on the gameplay are very good. It was very smooth. It was very enjoyable to play. They added a couple of little things, like, a couple other, I wouldn't say not vehicles, but a horse and a boat to get around the larger area better. Now, one thing I didn't like about the gameplay, as we've already mentioned, was I felt like it was a little bit too big. They weren't trying to be open world, but they were trying to be open world. Like, just be linear. It's very simple. And we kind of, I don't feel like rehashing that, but that was one part about the gameplay that I just didn't really care for. But let's go ahead. I think we're kind of finished on that.
Well, before we jump, I just will say I liked how Ellie and Abby played differently. I mean, you mentioned that Abby just felt a little more athletic, but it seemed like her section of the game was a little more direct combat oriented, whereas Ellie's was a lot more stealth. It just seemed like the encounters were, and you could do either one with both characters, which I loved. One of the great parts about the gameplay is you could attack these you could tackle these encounters either head on or stealth. Like, it gave you that option, and both of them were very viable. It just felt like Abby's sections were a little more designed for head-to-head action, like charging in, whereas Ellie's were a little more designed for sneaking. So I did like that they at least felt a little bit different. They had a little different weapons, like Ellie had the regular bow and Abby had the crossbow. So just
I forgot about that.
Just little things like that made it feel like, you are playing as two different characters. Like with Abby, you had to craft shivs, whereas Ellie had her pocket knife the whole time. Like, just little stuff like that. It's the same function generally, but they still were a little bit different. So that's all I wanted to add on the gameplay.
Man, I hate those dogs though. That would sniff around. Like, you had to get a certain distance from them. I absolutely hate those things. But
me too.
I kind of want to, where I was going, well, then you kind of wanted to chime in, which is fine. Which is absolutely fine. You had something else you want to say. We never discourage that.
No.
The Busted Buttons. I can't even say the name of the damn podcast, man. The Busted Buttons podcast. Anyways,
you should probably
let's go to Legacy, talk about the game overall, which I think you guys kind of know where this is going, but we've been really negative so far, and we're probably going to continue it a little bit in the Legacy, but we kind of also want to be, I think we should be a little bit more positive here, because we do think it's a, as I said, very good game. Overall, what's your feeling on the Legacy of The Last of Us Part 2?
Well, unfortunately, and I'm going to be negative for a second, but it's not actually about the game. Unfortunately, this game will be remembered, unfortunately, for the fucking review bombing that a bunch of pissed off little whiny people decided to do, even
after 1 or 2 hours.
Right, before they'd even had a chance to play the game. People were giving this game 0 out of 10s for no reason. They were mad that Ellie was a lesbian. They were mad that Abby looked, she was built not like your stereotypical video game character female. Or they were mad that Joel got killed off, or whatever. People were giving this game 0 out of 10s on Metacritic just because they didn't like the way the story went. People found every stupid reason to go bash this game. So the disconnect between the critical reviews, like the actual professional fuckers who review games, have this at like a 95 on Metacritic, 94, something like that.
Yeah, but the whole argument against them though is like they get paid a little bit.
That's true.
Or
that's
two,
true.
if you give a bad rating, you might not get that.
You get blackballed.
Studio's next game.
So I get that there's a little disconnect there, but the little whiny fuckers who went out and bashed this game and gave it a 0 out of 10. I don't care if you hated the story. Like the gameplay and graphic, we haven't even touched graphics. Graphics alone make this, like, even if the story absolutely sucked, the gameplay alone would make it a solid 7 out of 10 for me.
It was
the gameplay
probably the
was
best game, like graphically the best game I've ever saw until Ghost of Tsushima.
Just absolutely beautiful game. But that's more of a, that's not bashing The Last of Us Part 2. That's bashing little idiots who want their voices heard on the internet. Fuck those people. But so I will say, I thought it was a very good game as well. It didn't quite live up to the first one. I won't remember it as fondly as the first one, but it was still, the gameplay was an improvement. The graphics, of course, were an improvement. It's 8 years after the first, or 7 years after the first one was released. The story took a little step backwards, but even by video game standards, the story was very, very good. So to me, like, I will always remember it very fondly. Like, I had a fun time playing it for the most part, even with it being a kind of dark game, very violent game. I will still remember it fondly because the gameplay was amazing. The story was very good, and it is a beautiful game. So that's my tirade.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of that. Like, it will be sadly remembered for those review bombings, but I think it's a game that people are going to remember for a long time because it's so polarizing. Like, there were so many people that were upset. Like, a lot of people were upset about the same things, but then there was like, other people that were just upset about this, and then like there was just a lot of mixed feelings overall on this game. And like, I have mixed feelings talking about, like, I think it was a very good game. I did really enjoy the game. Like, it's a great emotional game, but at the end of the day, like, I have to say, even though I'm saying it's a very good game, I'm giving it an 8.5 on my 10-point scale. I was disappointed. Yeah. And that's kind of like, that's kind of how I'm going to remember it. A very good game, but overall, it was a disappointment. I think the story definitely took a step back. And just, I don't know, like, just overall, like, I mean, it's one of the most highly anticipated games that I can remember in a long time.
For sure.
And it's one of those games that I feel like the majority was let down. Like, if they liked the game like we did, like, I don't really hear too many people say, oh, The Last of Us Part 2 was great and it was better than the first one. I've not heard anybody say that shit. But I think that's how we're going to remember it. Like, I understand the law of diminishing returns. Yeah. I understand that a lot of times the sequel is not better than the first one, but we were just expecting so much.
The bar was set so high.
They gave us a very good game, but they still missed the mark on the story, and it still was a disappointment. And that, to me, like, I can't say it's going to be their legacy. I think it will be remembered as a good game, but it's also going to, like, there's going to be a lot of blah, 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 blah. But there's going to be a lot of that when talking about this game. And the damn ending took forever. Video games, wrap up your goddamn endings, okay? They don't need to take forever. Ghost of Tsushima, I applaud you for ending the game when I thought the game was going to be ended. Whereas The Last of Us, hey, let's take her to the farm. No, let's bring her back to Santa Barbara. No, let's take her back to the farm. And then, let's throw a scene with Joel right here at the end, which I really did like, though. I'm not going to sit here and say
I like that too.
I did not like. Actually, we've not talked about the ending. So here with the legacy, actually, it's kind of
a good time to talk
with the legacy part on the ending. What's your whole opinion on the ending of the game?
Okay, first of all, I completely agree that they stretched out like the quote unquote epilogue, like the ending section, so much. It was like it should have just ended. Abby had the chance to kill her, but she doesn't. She walks away, and that could have been the ending right there. They could have stopped it right there. And it would have felt like, maybe the characters actually made a little progress. Maybe the characters actually learned something. Abby decided not to offer. But then they tack on that. It seems like Ellie is so happy there with Dina and the kid, and then fucking Tommy shows up and is like, "Hey, we got." Evidence that, she might, we have a clue.
It doesn't even make sense for Tommy to show up. Like, that's just being selfish. Yeah. And he understands that, like, Dina and them have a baby. So I just didn't like that part because
that was a horrible
human that has common sense would understand that you just don't interrupt what's going on in their life when they have that life going on.
I agree completely. And Tommy had been like a good character through both games. Yeah. And then he just seems, I know he got shot, he got hurt. He lost his brother too, just like, Ellie lost her father figure. So I get that he wanted revenge too, but like to go and guilt trip her being like, you swore that, if we ever found her, we'd go after her again. It's just, when she's there with her girlfriend, or I don't know, maybe they got married. They may have been wife at that point.
I don't think they ever said anything in the game.
Yeah. And so it just, it was, and then for her to actually go after Abby, like after Abby let her live, for her to decide she wants to go after her, I thought it was just shit character development. I thought it showed that the characters didn't learn, or she did not learn anything. And yes, I get at the very end, she lets Abby live as well, whatever. But I feel like it pissed away the good with like when Abby let her live. Just the fact that she even went back after her. Plus, it did add more, like 3 more hours to this game, and I was ready to be done with it at that point. But, so that's
I didn't really like that whole Abby storyline. Like when she went to Santa Barbara, like she's looking for the Fireflies. Right. She comes across this group, the Rattlers. Like it was just tacked on. I just didn't like that. Like it should have ended on the farm the first time. Like going to the farm. Now, I will say something. I did like the ending overall, but the way that we got there and how long it took, I did not like. Like, I just felt like, we should have ended at the farm the first time, like going there and then going back out to Santa Barbara. Yeah. And then like kind of when you get to the part where Abby and Ellie are fighting, like that's where I kind of do start to like the whole ending. So overall, I was watching it today. It was very emotional. Like I do think it took them a while to get there, but I do think the ending was very good and kind of ending on legacy. I want to ask you a question. Has there ever been anything more shocking in video games than Joel getting murdered when he did? And
it's sad. I mean, you kind of put me on the spot there. But like, I can think like the first one where the daughter got killed, like right in the first few minutes of the game, like that came out of nowhere. So, but still, I mean, I'd have to sit there and honestly think about if there was anything more shocking. But
it's probably out there. I would think.
I would think it would be as well, because you expect another game playing, even if you're playing as Ellie, you expect Joel to be there. And just having him get offed, I think, and I think it's something more games will try to emulate that shock effect. I mean, we see it a little bit already. And like I said, Game of Thrones took it to the extreme. But
I wouldn't say that it shocked me. It just shocked me when it happened. Like, I kind of thought that Joel might die. Because, like, it's a crazy world out there, you know? So it's a very easy world in which Joel can, I keep on calling him Joe. Joel can die. I was shocked how early it happened in the game. But anyways, let's kind of talk about the future of the franchise and going forward. Let me ask you a question. Do you think there will be a part 3?
I think this franchise is too profitable for them not to. Even if they
I wasn't expecting you to go that way, but that is true.
I mean, and even if they think they've told the story they want to tell, I mean, there's too much money on the table for Naughty Dog to
This story's not over. That's my feeling.
Yeah. Because I'd be good with like, okay, now since Ellie got home and Dina and the kid were gone, I could see her trying to find her and see where it went. Or they could go in an entirely different direction. This is a very unexplored world. All in all. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I know in the first game, yes, we went from freaking Boston or whatever, or Pittsburgh, wherever we were.
Yeah, but we missed New York City, so we got a whole city right there we can explore.
So there are a ton of stories they could tell in a sequel, and I think financially they have to. So, but what do you think?
I don't know if there's going to be a part 3. The guy like, Neil Drunkman, or Drunkman.
we're the Drunkman.
Drunkman or whatever his name is. Like, here's what he said. He said, going forward, it would be exponentially harder to justify going back to that world and find a way to vary things up. But, I think they figure it out. Yeah. I do think, like, I kind of going with you. I think the money, like, I mean, this thing sold over 4 million units in its release weekend. Like, that is a ton. There's so much money. Now, that doesn't mean you should release a game, but I do think there's going to be a part 3. And really I think the financial aspect definitely plays a role in it. But as I kind of chimed in, like when you were talking, I don't feel like the story's over. Like, I feel like there's more to this story. Like, Abby and Ellie are still out there. Like, do you think Abby, okay, I'm not going to ask you. I'm going to go to my opinion on this shit. No, I don't want Abby back. Like, I don't like her as a character. And like, I don't understand exactly how you go forward with her. I know there is a plot point there, and I know that you can go forward with her, but asking you here now, how do you do it?
I don't think there's a reason to bring Abby back. I mean, they told her story. It wrapped up well. She got to live. She's still with the Scar, Lev, I think was his name. Mm-hmm. I don't need to know what happens to her. I'm good. Yeah. I'm not attached to her. Like Ellie, like I said, they could definitely have her trying to find Dina and see where that follows out. Yeah. Or, going back to Tommy. I mean, like, hey, I had a chance to kill her and didn't do it.
Good
so point. They could still do some stuff with Ellie. Abby, I hope her story's
Yeah,
done.
but what about Ellie's two fingers though? Like I mean, that's I don't know if that's her. Well, they're definitely not her trigger finger. But like I mean, that's going to put her at a disadvantage. But she's also immune too, so
she's got that advantage going for her. But much like I think Abby's story is done, I think this podcast just about has to be done here. So
yeah,
as usual, we've flown through, had a great time talking about The Last of Us Part 2. I think you really hit it on the head. It was a very, very, very good game.
Yeah.
Not quite at that great threshold, I think is exactly how both of us feel about it.
But still, thank you, Naughty Dog, for making a game that was very enjoyable to play and an emotional experience.
Right, absolutely. So, as always, all links we're going to talk about here are going to be down in the description. You can support us on Patreon or PayPal. If you can't support us financially, we totally get it. Leave us a review. Leave us a 5-star rating. That definitely helps with our placement on the podcast links and things like that. We do have 2 websites out there for video gaming merchandise and Zelda merchandise. We got tgpzgaming.com and 2guysplayingzelda.com. So go check those out. We may earn a little bit of commission on those because they are affiliate shops. Tell us a little bit about social media and YouTube.
And we got YouTube's where it all started. 2 Guys Playing Zelda, over 10,000 subscribers. So if you like Zelda walkthroughs, rankings, theories, definitely go check out that channel. We also have a YouTube channel for TGPC Gaming. Mostly just put our podcast there, but if that's the platform that you like to listen to, you can go check it out on there, although there are advertisements unless you get YouTube Premium. Anyways, we're on Discord. Go check out our Discord if you want to continue the conversation with us. We have a blast there talking PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo, PC, and some other things like sports and alcohol. And then we're also on social media, Twitter, Instagram. The username is @BustedBunsPC. But overall, Red, these last 2 weeks, man, they've been a lot of fun. They've been really emotional, man, because The Last of Us is an emotional franchise, but we just appreciate and enjoy talking these games with y'all so much.
Yeah,
we have so much fun doing it. But anyways, we're definitely not doing a game the next episode because I need a break from the game. So we'll just be talking the industry, but we will see you all on the next episode.